Hi friends, welcome to the channel. I'm Ken Smith, and this video is all about Henry Ford Museum's latest display, Driven to Win, Racing in America. And we are going to take a quick walk around, look at some video and some photos that I've taken, and just kind of give you an overall summary of what this amazing permanent display looks like. Now, as you walk into this entire exhibit, the very first thing you see is this old race car, and it's actually called Sweepstakes. Now, this car is actually not only the car that Henry Ford built, but actually it was the very first car that Henry Ford raced. And this car essentially started out his automotive legacy. Now, I did a whole video on this, so I won't bore you with a lot of the details. I'll put a link down in the description so that you can check it out further. But this is the very first thing that you see when you step inside this exhibit. Off to the left of Sweepstakes in this glass case, you'll see these tether cars. Now, these cars were actually miniature gasoline-powered race cars that were developed and used from about the late 30s all the way into the early 60s. And this is an amazing display, really worth checking out. There is a second race car that Henry Ford not only built, but he actually set a world's speed record at the time driving this car. And it's the famous 999. And there were actually two of these that were built, but this is the original one that still remains. And Henry Ford actually set a land speed record with this car. And while it only held a world record for just a little over 2 weeks, it eventually ended up helping Henry Ford launch the Ford Motor Company, which obviously is the legacy that he has left behind today. Now, I also did a video on this. I'll put a link in the description as well, so I won't get into a lot of details about this car, but this is 999. In 1908, driver George Robertson and mechanic Glenn Etheridge took this car to victory in the Vanderbilt Cup, America's first great automobile race. Now, it marked the first time an American-built car won a major international road circuit race. The 1906 Locomobile that you see here competed while wearing race number 16, and it's been known as Old 16 ever since. Now, as you take a close look at this race car, notice the chain-driven sprockets on both the driver and passenger side of the vehicle. Notice the spare tires that they carry, and the mere fact that all of these wheels have wooden spokes. It's a scary thought to think that they were actually racing a vehicle like this. Bobby Unser earned 3 victories at the Indianapolis 500, 2 national championships in open-wheel racing, plus an IROC championship in his lengthy competitive driving career. But his favorite event was the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb, which was located near Colorado Springs, Colorado. Unser earned a total of 13 wins, including 10 overall victories at Pikes Peak from 1956 to 1986. Now, to give you an idea of what this hill climb is like, to climb the mountain, or what is also dubbed as the Race to the Clouds, contestants climb 4,720 feet in 12.42 miles, making a total of 156 turns along the way. The zigzagging road, dangerous drop-offs, variable weather, and thinning air pushed drivers and cars to their limits. On November 12, 1965, Goldenrod streaked across Utah's Bonneville Salt Flats at 409.277 miles per hour, setting a new land speed record for wheel-driven cars. Builders Bob and Bill Summers powered Goldenrod with 4 massive Chrysler V8 engines. Although other car builders copied its sleek design, Goldenrod held the record until 1991. Racing legend A.J. Foyt made the most of this car's performance. It was key to Foyt winning his first 3 IndyCar championships in 1960, 1961, and 1963. From 1960 through 1963, Foyt drove this car in a total of 26 races and scored 13 of his 17 victories in it, all but 3 of them on dirt tracks. It was powered by the iconic Offenhauser 4-cylinder racing engine that dominated IndyCar races from the late 1930s until well into the 1960s. Every Indianapolis 500 from 1947 to 1964 was won with an Offenhauser engine. As a side note, as you walk around the displays, there is also racing paraphernalia that is associated not only with this particular car, but with racing in general. Lots of other displays and nuances that are, again, worth the time to take a look at and read. Now, what I really loved about this display, especially after seeing A.J. Foyt's car, is you'll see an even earlier version of Ford's V8, obviously in this Indianapolis race car. You can see how much racing has developed over time. So as an example, when you look at this particular racer and a V8 engine that is in the front of the car, the technology that has evolved over time, you can see where now the motor is in the back end of the car. The car is obviously more hugging the ground. There's more aerodynamics involved. And so you can definitely see how racing has evolved, especially at the Indianapolis 500 level. The 1965 Lotus Ford race car was the car that could qualify as the greatest disruptor ever in American racing history. In 1965, Formula One champion Jim Clark drove this car to victory in the Indianapolis 500, marking that race's first ever win by a rear engine car. A few years earlier, legendary road racer Dan Gurney had concluded that a car-engine combination designed using European Formula One technology could revolutionize the 500 and IndyCar racing. He brought Ford Motor Company together with Colin Chapman, the English builder of Lotus Formula One cars, and that collaboration resulted in a lightweight Lotus chassis powered by a specially designed Ford V8 engine. This 1972 McLaren M16A race car was driven by David Salt Walther. Now, what remains of this car is one of the worst crashes in Indianapolis 500 history. Salt Walther, on the first lap of the 1973 race, his car crashed into the outside wall and exploded and overturned. Though badly burned, Walther survived. After a lengthy rehabilitation, he returned to compete at Indy the following year. When I saw this car up close, I immediately thought of the movie Days of Thunder, starring Tom Cruise and Robert Duvall, and Duvall telling Tom, no, he didn't slam you, he didn't bump you, he didn't nudge you, he rubbed you, and rubbing, son, is racing. In 1988, Rick Mears qualified the original version of this car on the pole and won Penske Racing's 7th Indianapolis 500. That win marked Mears' third victory at one of motorsport's most renowned events and contributed to him becoming one of the most respected drivers in IndyCar racing history. That year, all three Penske team drivers, Mears, Danny Sullivan, and Al Unser Sr., piloted the new PC-17 chassis powered by redesigned Chevrolet engines. The Penske team swept the top three qualifying positions on pole day. Mears' 4-lap qualifying speed of 219.198 miles per hour became the new speedway standard, and the Penske team, led by Mears' win, took two of the top three podium positions. Unser placed third. This 1956 Chrysler 300B stock car, and especially its team, brought a fundamental change to NASCAR racing. The team owner, Carl Kiekhaefer, founder of Kiekhaefer Corporation, which is the maker of Mercury outboard boat motors, brought a level of professionalism to his team's operation that set a new standard in auto racing. His drivers and mechanics all wore matching uniforms, and his cars were immaculately prepared. He transported his cars in closed trucks rather than open trailers, providing more advertising space, and his teams were among the first to practice pit stops. That alone might not have influenced other teams to follow his example, but the clincher was his team's domination of the series in 1955 and 1956. In the 1960s, Ford Motor Company made the most massive sports car racing effort ever seen in America. The objective was to beat the dominant Ferrari team in the world's most important sports car endurance race, the 24 Hours of Le Mans. The weapon was a family of cars best known as the Ford GT40, Ford's first of 4 straight victories. In 1966 was won by the GT40's Mark II variant, fielded by the Shelby American team and driven by Bruce McLaren and Denny Hulme. The next year, Shelby returned with this car, the more powerful Mark IV. The chassis was built of an aluminum honeycomb material used in aircraft construction, and the body shape resulted from hours of wind tunnel testing. The big 427 cubic inch V8 engine was based on Ford's stock car racing engine and proved highly reliable. Drivers Dan Gurney and A.J. Foyt beat the second-place Ferrari by 32 miles at a record-breaking average speed of 135.48 miles per hour. That win was another first at Le Mans because, unlike the year before, the winning car was built in the United States. This was the first Le Mans win by an American car built in the United States and driven by Americans. You simply can't talk about American sports car racing without America's sports car. The Chevrolet Corvette was in its 5th styling generation when the race version C5R debuted in 1999. The Corvette racing team earned 35 victories with the C5R through 2004, including an overall victory at the 24 Hours of Daytona in 2001. Now, before I forget, I just couldn't possibly cover everything that's here at Driven to Win. For example, there's motorsports performance training that allows you to experience what race car drivers and athletes actually do during driving and pit stops. There's the Fueled by Passion display, which gives you the ability to immerse yourself in a 180-degree multi-sensory theater. Obviously, I couldn't include any of those in the video, but that is also part of the Driven to Win exhibit here and worth visiting. When machinist Gregory Montgomery started racing in 1953, all drag racers were amateurs with real jobs supporting their hobby. This 1933 Willys Drag Racer was a car that helped change all of that. Montgomery bought an old Willys in 1958 and built a dragster so successful that promoters actually started paying him to run at drag strips nationwide. In 1966, Montgomery became one of drag racing's first full-time professional drivers. Now, top fuel dragsters are the fastest cars approved by NHRA drag racing. Their nitro fuel requires less oxygen during combustion, so their engines produce more horsepower than with a typical gasoline motor. Gary Ormsby drove this car to an NHRA Top Fuel Championship in 1989. He used it again in 1990, racing at speeds near 300 miles an hour. Now, this 2012 Ford Fiesta is driven by Ken Block, and Ken Block has successfully used his charisma along with his unquestionable car control skills to create a name for himself and to build public awareness for his sponsors and their products. Now, like early racers like Barney Oldfield was largely limited to personal appearances, posters, and newspaper stories and ads to build their brand and the brand of their backers, Ken Block has been able to add video, television, the internet, and social media to his arsenal for attracting attention. His viral Gymkhana videos alone have generated hundreds of millions of views around the world. The car you see here in this video was used in the film Gymkhana 5 Ultimate Urban Playground, San Francisco. Hudson cars began dominating the stock car racing circuit in 1951 upon the release of the Hornet model. Although the original intent of the Hudson was not for racing, the car is equipped with a bulletproof 145 horsepower L6 engine, class-leading handling from the step-down unibody chassis, and it was paired with the talent of top drivers. The Fabulous Hudson Hornets captured 81 NASCAR race wins and multiple championships from 1951 to 1955. This car featured in the exhibit was prepared by legendary race mechanic Smokey Yunick, was provided to NASCAR champion Herb Thomas by Hudson halfway through the 1952 season. Thomas was the most prolific Hudson driver in NASCAR with 78 total podium finishes at the wheel of the Hornets and holds the records for the highest win percentage of any NASCAR driver. This is the only Hudson campaigned in NASCAR known to exist. Any other Hudson that you see that's dressed up like this is really just a replica. Now, what makes this absolutely fantastic is that it actually was not part of the Driven to Win series. It happened to be there on a rotating display that was sponsored by Henry Ford and Hagerty Drivers Foundation display. So I was very fortunate to be able to capture this. It was only on display from mid-July 2023 through mid-October 2023. Friends, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate your support. Have a wonderful day, and most of all, be blessed.